Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Dan Doggett, and I am an IT Accessibility Program Specialist with the Maryland Department of Disabilities Assistive Technology Program. And this is Read Your Email, Message, and Newsletter Accessibility. I see we've got about 14 people with us so far, so thank you all for joining us today. Let's go ahead and get started. We have a couple of housekeeping items to discuss before we get started. First of all, we do have live captioning available today. If you would like to have captioning in the ribbon for your Zoom, there should be a 3 dots more icon. If you click on that and then click on the captions, those captions will appear on the bottom of your screen. Also, as I mentioned before, this training session is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel after we have it posted in a few days. So if you have any colleagues that could not be here for this, they will be able to view that at a later date. Also, something important to note for later on in our discussion today, at about an hour ago, you all should have received an email with the subject line demonstration email for training. This is something that we're using for later on, an exercise. If you did not receive that email, I'm going to ask for you both to check your spam folder to see if it was sent to spam. And then if it is not, if you still do not have that email, again, it was from about noon today, if you can just put your email in the chat, and we could just quickly forward that to you so that you'll have it for our demonstration later today. So as I was saying, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted to our YouTube channel. We've got some great content today, but I also, I have the chat up here. So I'm going to ask if you have questions as we go along, please feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A. So I can have those up here, and we'll certainly have time at the end if folks have questions that we can go over. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So today's agenda, we're going to sort of talk about the importance of email and newsletter accessibility. And then we're going to go over some best practices, both specific to email and specific to newsletters, as they are a little bit different. And in this course, if you have taken other sort of basic digital accessibility courses, a lot of similar content will be addressed here. Just sometimes, if you've taken our courses on document accessibility, a lot of similar structures will be in place. It's just a matter of how those things are implemented. So there should be a little bit of a review here for folks, and then also a chance for us to practice this ourselves. So I see here, Rena, and Sherry, see your emails. We're going to send that email to you momentarily. So thank you. Okay. So why should we concern ourselves with email accessibility? It's oftentimes the last thing people think about when they think about their digital accessibility. But it is also something that we need to, be very mindful of as well. So taking a look at the roster of today's, participants, I did notice a lot of local and state email addresses. And so it's extremely important that we think about our emails, because our emails are also part of Title II of the ADA. So that holds local and state governments accountable for being accessible, including public-facing information and services. So normally we think about our websites and our documentation, but our communications that go out to our constituents is also extremely important. So those of you who are here from state or local government, welcome. I'm glad to have you with us. But this is also, an important thing to think about if you work in communications and regularly engage and communicate with large, varied audiences. It's a good idea to think about digital accessibility when you're putting together your announcements for your audiences, because if your audiences can't read the announcements that you provide, you're being less effective. Okay, so I do see some more emails coming in, so thank you. We'll get that email sent to you all momentarily. And if you're just joining us, just another reminder, we did send an email out with a demonstration email for training in the subject line. If you did not receive that, please put your email address in the chat. So, okay, continuing with this. So alongside working with large varied audiences, if you happen to work with people that use assistive technology, this will make it easier to communicate with them in the office. And another thing that I really always strive to think about is, when it comes to digital accessibility, it is relatively easy to add to your normal day-to-day actions, and I truly believe it benefits everyone to use it. So, okay, so Stephen says those who have sent their addresses in chat should have now received a copy. Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate that. Okay, so let's start by talking about email best practices. And, our emails, like I said before, if we're talking about, like if you've done a basic digital accessibility course, a lot of these are going to be some fundamental things. So this will be a review for some of you and possibly new information for others. So when we send our emails, one of the most important things we need to think about is the use of color and fonts in our emails. And, there is, I know I've sometimes received emails from folks that, want to be a little, fancy or add some personality to their emails. And they might use certain font colors that, might seem a little, more personable, but it can actually make it more difficult to, to read an email. So what we want to try to do is avoid font colors that are going to be difficult for folks to read. I generally say avoid bright font colors in general. One thing, I feel like everyone has probably had an email come out with that high vis green or something, and it's very hard to read. But we want to be mindful of our low vision and colorblind, audience members. And based on our accessibility guidelines, we try to ensure that the contrast is high so that all people can read it. And so typically, the most high contrast would be black text with a white background. But we want to aim to be at about 4.5 to 1 is sort of our ratio to text to background. And there's a couple of ways that we can go about this. So if you are, if you want to, use different text, there are various tools that can help you do that. I use a product called, well, it's not a product, it's a free add-on. Let me see if I can get to it here. So this is the accessible color picker. And so I use this all the time because I do a lot of testing of websites and information, and I can actually test to see if that font is going to work against that background. And here we have a AAA compliance. This is 10.065. So this is very easy to read for most folks. So something to think about. Now, this is not of course, we're going to go over these tools so much, but this is just something that I use. It's called Accessible Color Picker, and it's a free extension. Let me get back to it here. Another important thing about colors, we want to ensure that it is not the only way that we convey information. For example, you never want to have, all departments highlighted in red will be included because folks who are colorblind may not be able to see that, or folks who are non-sighted at all, this is information that's not being conveyed to them via a screen reader. Next thing is, this is something that is sort of changing a little bit. And so there might be folks who have disagreements on this, but In general, for right now, I recommend folks use sans serif fonts. And so those are fonts that don't have, um, little sort of ornate parts to them. So if you look at a New Times Roman, for example, that's that is a serif font, and sometimes this makes it a little bit more difficult to read. But any standard fonts like Calibri are a good option for something like this. And then I always recommend, with your emails, to use about a 12-point or larger font text, just to make it, for ease of reading. You might find that, this is a really good example of, this is information that we want to do both for our low vision, non-visual, and colorblind users. But, this is all information here that I think really benefits everyone. Me, for example, I'm sighted, I'm not colorblind, but I don't want to read your neon green text. I want to make sure that that text, I don't have to zoom in to read it because it's too small, things like that. These are things that, all of us can benefit from. Okay, so moving on, let's talk a little bit about images. And if you have done any other training in digital accessibility, you know that alternative text or alt text is extremely important when we're using images in our media. Non-visual users generally navigate through digital media using a screen reader. And when they get to an image, the alt text is there to provide them a description of what that image is, so that there's no loss of content for non-visual users. And so here on my screen, I have just a screenshot from my Gmail. So here at the state of Maryland, we used Google, but most email providers should have the option to be able to add our alt text. And so here's a screenshot. I have added the Maryland Department of Disabilities assistive technology logo. And in the little red box, I noted here, there is a selection here that says edit alt text. And so in that edit alt text, you can add the description of what that image is. And, this is something that is, pretty much hopefully universally standard in website design, but sometimes gets left out in emails. And it's something that is just as easy to do, if not easier to do here. Couple of things about alt text. You want to avoid, saying image of, because the screen readers will generally note that something is an image and be able to describe that for you. So when your alt text says image of, it basically is a redundant thing, because the screen reader says graphic and then says image of. Also, our alt text is very contextual. So you want to make sure that whatever the alt text is for that picture is specific to the content that's in there. So sometimes, especially now with all these AI tools, there are sometimes they're putting in their own alt text for the image. And so even if there is alt text there, you want to check it to make sure it is textual for what the information is that you're sending out. One thing we want to make sure we avoid is avoid putting images of text in. So if you have a picture of one thing that I think gets sent a lot in emails are images of flyers that get printed out. And this is, these are the types of things that we don't necessarily think about if we have an event coming up and, we've posted some flyers, but we want to get the word out. So we're sending it out, that flyer out to our email list. You need to make sure that that flyer itself is accessible. And I do know that there are some challenges with programs such as Canva with accessibility. So if you're having challenges making the flyer itself accessible, consider just putting that text in the email rather than posting the flyer. Again, it's it's a little bit more effort to, post that information as text, but it will go out to a larger audience that will be able to understand it. And then lastly, it's important not to include any flashing or animated GIFs or GIFs. I'm not sure how folks like to pronounce it in your emails, as this might, cause some sensitivity issues with some folks. All right, so I want to take a moment right now and just see how we're doing. I'm going to look in the chat. If anyone has any questions so far, if you'd like to see me demonstrate adding alt text to my Gmail account, just see if there's any questions. Okay, looking good so far. So I'm going to go ahead and keep going. So let's talk about hyperlinks now. And hyperlinks, if you're not familiar, these are the linked text in an email. So if you want to, send your, the people that you were emailing to a specific destination, website, outside of the email address, that's what we're talking about. So the link text that you provide, it's important that it denotes the destination that you are going to. We want to so sometimes you can just write the email address, not email address, the website address for the destination. However, a lot of website addresses can get very long and have lots of numbers and letters that when folks are using a screen reader, that information, may not be relevant to them or, understandable. So you could change that, that hyperlink text to say specifically, where that is going to. So for instance, for the Maryland TAP program, I might change that link text to say, Maryland TAP website. And so that way folks are not, the screen readers aren't reading all the full URL, they're just reading the text that I, am putting in there. In terms of email addresses are acceptable as is. I think that page titles, like the title of a website or a phrase is usually sufficient. You don't want to use terms like click here or see more, because those are very vague for folks and they don't necessarily know where they're going to be clicking to. So you want to be, descriptive about where they're going to be going. You want to make sure that links are visibly distinguishable from regular text. And generally speaking, if you're working in email, most of the time, if you're creating a hyperlink, it will automatically make the text, I think it's probably blue and underlined as well. So folks, visually can see, okay, this is going to send me to a website. And last but not least, don't use color as the only method to indicate a link. And like I said, most email services, they do both a different color and underlined. Okay, so let's talk about plain language. Plain language is something, especially right now in the state of Maryland, we are thinking about a lot more intentionally. And it's something that we want to think about in terms of our email in general. So with plain language, the importance here is you want to write with your audience in mind. The idea is you want to make it so that your audience understands what you are communicating to them easily. So that means that, especially here in government, we use a lot of acronyms. So it's very important to define acronyms in the first instance. So my example here is the Maryland Department of Disabilities, then in parentheses, MDOD. And then from then on, I can, refer to it as MDOD because all of my, I have already explained what that is from the beginning. It's also important to break large amounts of text into shorter paragraphs. It's important to, utilize some white space so that readers are not, overwhelmed by the information. And then also using bullets for lists. is also a way to really easily convey, listed information versus, adding commas and, run-on sentences. So similar to, what you're looking at right here. So just bulleted information to help your readers, understand your information better. Some other general tips. And again, some of this is accessibility, and some of this is, some of this might be stuff that you're already doing in your day-to-day, emails. In terms of attachments, reference your attachments in the body of your email. Assistive technology tools will pick them up, but it's nice to have an understanding of what that's going to be before folks open it up. And you might already be doing this, but this is just something that we want to think about. And then, of course, we want to think about those actual attachments, and are those attachments accessible themselves? And so, if you have questions on creating accessible documents or PDFs, we have pre-recorded a webinar on creating accessible documents, and it's something that we do at least once a year here for our program. So I have hyperlinked that the recording of that, and when these slides go out, you'll be able to access that as well. Another general tip, when it comes to copying and pasting into your emails, be very mindful that sometimes formatting might be lost when you copy and paste. So if you have, like, for instance, a table that has formatted headers, when that gets copied into an email, that heading might be lost. So it's something you want to be careful about when you're copying and pasting material, say from a Word document. Okay, so that is everything I sort of wanted to go over with our emails. Again, a lot of this are just sort of general best practices, both in terms of digital accessibility, but also just for professional email usage. Want to take a moment now and see if we have any questions. I don't see any in the chat. Let me see in Q&A. Nothing here. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move along and talk a little bit more about newsletters. And so newsletters are a little bit different. So newsletters are generally, allow you to, customize your content a little more than you would necessarily would with an email. You might have more visual representation. The blocking of, the different content that's put there is going to be a little bit different. And so, creating a newsletter in MailChimp or Constant Contact is similar to creating a website. So if you've ever created a website in Squarespace or WordPress, there's lots of options for layouts, and sort of you can drag certain items to sort of build out what you're creating. And so there's a little bit more things we need to think about in terms of accessibility, because there's more options than you necessarily would in an email. But you do want to start by applying those email best practices that we talked about. So all of the things we had previously discussed also refer to newsletters, but there's also more to think about when it comes to newsletters. So this is something that is not really available in email, but we want to think about our headings and our structure. And this is something both we think about in terms of our documents and something we think about in terms of building our websites. So headings provide a method for finding content quickly. Visually, we use our headings, and we could suddenly see, okay, this content is organized under this subject. This sub-content is organized here. And it's something that helps us visually see our content better. It also really, really helps folks who are using screen readers be able to navigate through content. So on the screen here, I have a screenshot of some various different heading levels. And so, typically, with our heading structure, you want to start with, your main topic and then sort of, dig down from there. So if I'm working through this as a screen reader user, and the information that I really want to hear about is in that less important heading, that heading level 3, using our headings, I can skip down to that using keyboard shortcuts on a screen reader. If I did not have those headings available, I would have to sift through all of that information that I didn't necessarily need in order to get to the important information. So when we incorporate headings, it's important that you follow the template in your program, whether it's Constant Contact or any others. I'll demonstrate this for us a little bit later, but when you use a heading, when you use the template heading structure, it automatically creates those tags that you need for doing that. If you just make the text larger or a different color, that does not signify anything to screen readers that this is a heading. So it's important to use the layout tools in your program. Okay, and like I said, we'll go through this together in a little bit. Okay, so reading order, now that we're thinking about newsletters, becomes more and more important. Typically in an email, you're pretty much just going, it's usually, the structure is just top to bottom. With our newsletters, you might have content next to other content, and you need to think about how that layout is structured and making sure that the information is being portrayed to screen readers as you have intended it visually. So you want to determine that document structure and language, and then know that if you're adding in 2 columns, so for instance, I have a picture here, and I'm just going to describe this for folks. It's a 4 square grid with the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I have arrows signifying which ways they need, the content should be going. If you create this using 2 columns, the automatic, screen reader is going to go from 1 to 3 to 2 to 4 because it's reading them on a column basis. So it's important that as you're putting together your layout, you're thinking about that structure as you go. Also, images that are separated from text may not be read in the intended order. So that's important. If you want to have the text first and then the image to sort of go, with that as an example, please consider that when you're putting these newsletters together. Okay, so it is now 1:30, and so it's time for us to go over our exercise. And so that exercise again, we sent out a test email to folks, and it looks like everyone should have received it by now. I want to take maybe 2 or 3 minutes to have folks take a look at that email newsletter that I sent out and see if you can identify any specific accessibility issues. And so let's just go ahead and we'll take 2 minutes. Everyone give it a look, look through it. One thing I want to point out, there are going to be some things that you can identify visually. There will also be some things that you may only be able to identify if you are using assistive technology. And then there are other things that you may not even be able to identify either way that we're going to actually go into the newsletter itself and take a look at. So go ahead, take a look at the email, and anything that comes out to you, feel free to put it in the chat. I see some folks are already putting some things in there, so thank you for that. So again, take 2 minutes and take a look at the email, and we'll see what we can come up with. Okay, let's give everyone one more minute. But I'm seeing some great stuff in the tech in the chat so far, so thank you. Okay, so let's feel free if you're still finding stuff you want to go ahead and put that in the chat. Feel free to do so. But it looks like we've caught a lot of these, so thank you for taking a look, folks. So I'm going to just go through starting from some Priya here says color contrast issues with IT accessibility news and announcements, and so this is probably the most glaring issue visually is the the text color and the background color make it very difficult to see. And so I'm going to use my accessible color picker and we'll see how bad this is. So remember, we want to aim for 4.5. Let's see what we're at. Okay, so this is 1.3. So this is very difficult to read. So obviously this is one of those things that, if you just look at, if you just looked at it, it'd be very easy to see that this could be difficult. But yeah, that was a great one. So another one, Serena says font size is too small. Okay, if you take a look down here, where we talked about our smartphones, the font size here is, very difficult to read. So yeah, we got that one. Okay, and so now we talked about our meaningful hypertext or hyperlinks. So here I have, it says register now through Zoom, and then I just put the full Zoom URL here. A screen reader would read all of this information, whereas I could have just taken the text here, register now through Zoom, and made that the hyperlink text. And everyone would be able to read that and know exactly what was going on there. So good. Okay, so looking at our chat, Christine says acronyms are not spelled out. Okay, so if you look first at our about us text, you could see the ITAI, which is not, is not explained here anywhere. And I did this on purpose. I said the ITAI supports state agencies to make Maryland's NVA standards supported by MDOD and do it. So, perfect example of wonderful government, acronym speak without explaining any of that information. So this is a great usage of, plain language. We want to make sure that our audience understands all of these acronyms as we spell them out. So great on finding that one. Let's see. Rena says, click here for more. So I have a button here at the bottom here that does not provide us any information. If I click on this, I don't know where this is sending me. So we want to make sure, to have information, to let you know where that's taking you to. So great. Okay. Oh, wow. Priya noticed that we have some missing alt text. So curious, Priya, are you using a screen reader or are you going into the developer's window to see that? But you are correct. So the Maryland Assistive Technology Program logo does not have alt text for it. So one way we can look at that is I can go into the program itself, or I can actually, inspect this and see, and this is not something that, you necessarily need to do, but there is not a alt tag for that image itself. So Priya is saying, I saw that it was missing because the alt text was, oh, you're talking about the iPhone. Yes, because the iPhone does have alt text, but the alt text was just the the file name, which is not informative and can be kind of annoying. And this is actually very common sometimes when you're adding in photos or images. The alt text might automatically, adjust to whatever that file name is. So another reason it's important to be mindful of that. Okay, so let me just go through our chat. So thank you again, folks. All the, a lot of great responses here. Let me see, what else am I missing here? I think someone said, I want to see who said it here. Not seeing it here. Well, okay, so what we're going to do is, well, so first of all, another thing I want to point out is this is a lot of text. I thought someone maybe talked about that wall of text. But this is information that could really benefit from being, sectioned out into paragraphs. So, I have a hard time focusing through this amount of information and being able to convey all the information there. Separating it out into paragraphs would make this much, much more easier to digest. Okay, so I'm going to go. So thank you. Everyone picked up most of the things here. I'm still working. And I'm going to go into the email itself. And so I'll talk about sort of how I put this together and how we can sort of fix those items here. So here is the email or the newsletter that I put together. And so we can go ahead and fix this email right now, starting with, let's change this. We're going to just make this text white. And I could go and check to make sure that it's accessible, but I do know that that color combination makes that a lot easier. So much, much, much easier here. Something that folks, and I did this on purpose because I wanted to show how it was used here. Something I didn't see was about our headings. So visually, we have, two headings here. However, if I go and click on this text box and I go, so this is sort of the heading icon or the styles bar. This is just listed as text because, so if I was using a screen reader, I would not be able to navigate to different headings because these are just listed as text. So I'm going to update this to heading level 2. So that way, so I think this one is, yeah, so this is our heading level 1. So now, as sort of a subheading, here's our heading level 2. And I'll do the same thing down here. We're going to change this to heading level 2. And again, this is one of those things that you probably would not have been able to pick up unless you went into the HTML of the email itself. But it's one of those things that, is super important for screen reader users, because if I'm a screen reader user and I get an email and the first thing I see is this wall of text about us, I don't care about this. I want to know about that mobile features, the mobile features webinar. So I'd like to skip down to that heading. However, I can't do it if we don't use our heading structures that are given to us in the program. So extremely important to use those heading structures. Okay, let me see if we have, I want to make sure I'm not missing anything from anyone. Oh yeah, so let's talk about fixing our alt text. And so if I go to the image here, and this is just in Constant Contact, there could be different ones in MailChimp or other ones. In this one, I'm going to right click and click change. And so from here, will it let me fix it? Let me see if it'll let me fix it. I think if I click replace, no, it's the same thing. All right, well, let's say I'm replacing that. I'm going to use this photo right here. So right here, I have the photo, and then below it, I have this option to add my alt text. And here is where we want to put that information. So that's how that is done in Constant Contact. Again, that's a a super easy thing to add to make your content more accessible for folks when using these products. Another thing I want to talk about with Constant Contact specifically is, so we were talking about sort of that order structure. So I'm going to sort of put together my own email just to sort of show you all how I'm going to do this. Now, with Constant Contact, you can create an email using their builder, or you can create it with, just using HTML code. I don't recommend doing it just via HTML. There's a lot of, it makes it a little bit more difficult and time consuming. However, it does give you a lot more control. And one of the things that we're sort of limited to when we're using a template, when we're using their builder, is in terms of that, the structure, that focus order. And so if I want to put in, let's say, I'm just going to put in, I've got these two images. Let me put that up there. All right, well, I'm not going to use that right now, but the automatic focus order that Constant Contact will do is left, right, left, right. So if you're going to go, if you're adding in a similar structure like we talked about with that grid, and you really want it to go, left, then down left, then right, then down right. I don't think I'm doing a good job of explaining that. In that, you would really have to use the HTML builder to do that and create that focus order in there, because Constant Contact will just automatically go left to right when you're using it. Now, I'm not sure if that works the same way with other newsletter builders, but that is something that I have noticed specifically when it comes to Constant Contact. Okay, let's see. I want to make sure, so Priya says, correct me if I'm wrong, if Screen Reader does not see alt text, it picks up the file name. Sometimes, it depends. Sometimes it will not pick up the image at all. Sometimes it will just divert to the file name itself. And they also said our agency uses Gov delivery, and I'm assuming that it would have the same features like Constant Contact to make content accessible. Yes, I believe Gov delivery is powered by Constant Contact. I'm not sure. I have to look that up. But yeah, most of these, they have similar functionality. My recommendation is if you are, it's now called Granicus. Well, thank you for that, Priya. So my recommendation, and if you are regularly putting out communications, focus on, if you haven't already done so, create a template for your department that you can go back to rather than starting over, and really focus on making that template accessible so that, a lot of this legwork is sort of done once, and then you don't have to think about it again. Now, you add it, the moment you add in an image or you add in a hyperlink, then at that point you need to be mindful of those things we talked about. But starting with an accessible template and using it over and over again certainly makes this a lot easier. Okay, so I'm going to go back to, actually, I want to, since I'm on here on Constant Contact, if there are folks who use Constant Contact and wanted, had any other questions about the accessibility on this, I'm happy to show that to you. Okay, well, seems like we'll be able to have some time at the end too, so I can go back to that. All right, so I'm going to go back to our slide. Let me just pull this back up. So here we talked about, these were all the issues we brought up. We had insufficient color contrast. We had a wall of text filled with jargon and acronyms. A URL was spelled out fully versus using a descriptive hyperlink. We had nondescript button information, which was click here for more. we had headings that were not labeled, and then we had improper or missing alt text for images. So looks like outside of the unlabeled headings, we were able to spot everything very quickly. So that's great. Super happy to see that we were able to get through that. So thank you, folks. All right, so I want to talk a little bit now about some resources that are available to you, starting first with my department. And so this is the Maryland Department of Disabilities Assistive Technology Program. And my department specifically is the IT Accessibility Initiative. So here's your wall of text acronyms. The ITAI, that is a part of MDTAP, that is a part of MDOD. We have a website that has a ton of resources available for you. We have quick cards on document accessibility. We have our training calendar, which we update every 6 months to sort of show you at a glance of what's coming up. And we also have a link to our YouTube series, which has all of our previously recorded webinars, which this webinar will eventually be on as well. There are also links to many other accessibility resources there. So, this is, something we want to, point folks to help you out on your accessibility journey. Also, feel free to contact us directly. And so our email address is mdod.nva@maryland.gov. And like I said, we'll send these slides out for folks, so you'll have access to all of the links in them as well. I also want to talk about the W3C website. W3C stands for World Wide Web Consortium, and their website has a tremendous amount of resources. So W3C is actually the organization that puts together and publishes the International Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So those are basically the structure that we use to build our accessibility guidelines within the state and federally as well. So they have a ton of resources. Also provides a bunch of guidance on designing and developing websites and content. And so there's just a wealth of information there. There are free courses you can take. And so at the very end there, I also put a link to their website as well. Okay, and with that, we have about 10 minutes left. So, I want to, have this opportunity, folks have any questions for me. If you want to see me demonstrate anything, whether it's email related or newsletter related, I'm happy to demo those for you. So I want to go over to the chat into the Q&A, see if we have any questions from folks. Nothing in the Q&A. Okay, great. Well, no questions means that then hopefully that means that I've covered enough so that you're able to go forth and create accessible emails and newsletters. So again, at this time, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And again, this training is being recorded and will be put up on our YouTube channel. So we will certainly send an email out to you folks once that's available. Also, we'll be sending out the slide deck that has all of the helpful links so that you have access to them later. I want to thank everyone again for joining us and look forward to seeing you all for our next webinar. So thank you very much.